Welcome everyone to Nerdwide.com's weekly podcast titled Hero Cravings: The Arrowverse. We're going to cover and break down all CW Arrowverse shows episode by episode for you listener. As always, I'm your host Tyler Haynes with my good friend and co-host Mr. Chris Rivers.
Happy weekend.
It's a beautiful weekend here in Nashville as well. Quick housekeeping before we get into everything. Don't forget to share, rate, and review this podcast on all of your podcasting services. We're officially on YouTube and have been uploading every single one of our episodes there, so make sure you subscribe and check us out at youtube.com/nerdwide. Chris recaps Blacklist and Blindspot at purefam.com, so make sure you check out his weekly recaps there. And we have also started our weekly questions, and we start those on Mondays, and we're going to do Arrowverse question answers for last week, and then the question for this week at the end of this show. Now, this is our 30th official episode. I'm going to give you a recap of how the show is going to go down if you have not caught on already. Each week, we go through all the Arrowverse TV episodes in order as they air, and we're going to bring you our thoughts and reactions to every one of these episodes. That being said, we're going to jump right into it with Supergirl episode 315, titled In Search of Lost Time. Last week, we saw that Sam has been with Lena, but we got a little finally got a time frame here. She has been with her for 3 days. Lena has put her in a medically induced coma just so she could test her blood and everything. We see that the team is playing charades. I'm liking this whole little chemistry we've got with Jean's father and the rest of the team. Because, last week we saw everyone doing karaoke, and this week we see them playing charades. Meanwhile, while we're playing charades, Jean's dad tells the team that Jean actually had an imaginary friend named Zook. I thought that was very funny that we see Martian Manhunter having an imaginary friend and things like that.
Right.
We flash over to Lena. Lena tells Sam that she is Rain and shows her a little bit of evidence and tries to line up the time frames. We see Sam get angry, and she tries to break out of her little hospital room that Lena has made inside of her facility, Lena Tower or Luthor Tower, whatever you want to call it. And she's got her trapped with a force field, and she's not letting her leave. Obviously, that's a big plot twist that we've got going on here, because she's kind of holding her there against her will. But we get more answers later on the show for that. We see that Kara and Mon-El begin training together with Mon-El's keeping his promise from last episode, teaching her how to do cape tricks. I feel like it's not really that essential to the storyline, but we're seeing it still. And then as they're training, we see Wynn fixes Mon-El's suits from the future. What do you think about his suit, Chris? It wasn't that remarkable to me.
No, not really. Excuse me. I think that one thing that we are getting out of the training scenes, though, is it's putting them together.
Yeah.
It's them spending more time together. But yeah, the suit didn't look all that remarkable.
He had the house crest outline, but there was nothing in it. Did you notice that? Or as Supergirl and Superman has the House of L symbol. His was just blank.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that plays into anything. We see that Jean's dad his dementia is advancing, and he's doing this prayer/ritual that was on Mars to try and slow it down and get rid of it. But while he's doing this, he doesn't realize that his psychic abilities is affecting everybody else in the vicinity of him. We see that it's making everybody more angry, and on top of that, it's also due to this astrological anomaly that's starting to go on, which I do believe is going to start playing into the World Killer storyline.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you see Jean's dad as being possibly a secret weapon against the World Killers? Because I don't know if they'll work. I don't know if they'll work this way. But if he's doing something like that in proximity of the World Killers, could they turn on each other?
Right. It could make them angry like it did for Supergirl and everything. And we know it doesn't affect them if they've got the little earpieces on.
Right.
Oh. That would make sense. Or he could do that to try and save his son somehow, some way, and sacrifice himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Look at you with all these series. I swear you're a writer. Um, we see Lena pushing Sam to make Rain come out, and when she did this, we didn't know this at the time, but she was filming the whole situation go down, and we flash back over to them after a little bit of time and see that we see Rain destroying her little hospital room, and Sam wakes up, and Lena's just sitting outside, and she shows her the video. But Sam's biggest thing and her biggest problem of everything that's going on is that she has a problem with killing all of the people. It's not her becoming Rain. She has a problem that she's doing all this stuff she has no idea about. And especially because, I mean, honestly, I'd feel the same way. Just waking up one day, I've got all this lost time, but I feel like my alter ego kills a lot of people. Granted,
Right.
some of them deserve it, but you can't be judge, jury, and
Yeah.
executioner. So I mean, that's her biggest thing. We also see like, we hinted at it last week with Jean, but he's having like a real big problem with his dad having dementia, and he's doing everything he can
Hmm.
to save him and slow it down. But you can tell it's really taking a toll on him. We see that Supergirl is getting angry from Jean's dad, but while all of this was going down, she's training with Monel, and like you said earlier, that's probably like the biggest thing with them is it getting them together. But she got so angry, she told Monel off and about everything that she's been hurting and suppressing about how it's not fair and all this other stuff. And I feel like that was the touching moment we've really been needing between the two,
Hmm. Yeah.
because I mean it makes a lot of sense. She's one extremely angry that he comes back happy, and she's been miserable and all this other stuff. But again, what was it? 70 something years has passed, and so he's had time to heal from
Yeah.
everything that's happened.
Absolutely.
So um, we see that while Jean's dad's having this meltdown from his dementia and his psychic anomalies and everything, he releases all of the prisoners that were in the facility. There's also becomes like a giant pandemonium of all the DEO soldiers and officers fighting each other, which I thought was a real cool scene with how they did it. When beating up some other guy, and I thought it was kind of cool. Then
Hmm.
that obviously gets fixed, and Jean's father apologizes to the DEO, and that kind of quelled that whole storyline. We see that we go back over to Sam and Lena, and Lena's holding Sam as she's crying and belligerent, and Sam tells her, she goes, "You have to promise that to keep me away from Ruby until I am cured. I am not going to be around Ruby like this, obviously for fear of her hurting Ruby." So
Right.
and then we see that Olsen is the dream boyfriend that everybody wants. Well, all girls want, not me. Um, because last episode he was calling Lena and she never answered. This episode he took it into his own hands to kind of show up to work, and they had a moment that she was like, I'm trying to save the world. I'm doing good here, and she's keeping the secret from James, which is understandable. And the reason I say he's a very good boyfriend, he comes back to her work towards the end of the episode with a bunch of food. He says, I understand you're trying to save the world and you have your secrets and everything. He says, but I know what it's like to people, obviously referring to his relationship with Supergirl and Superman. And he says, it's real hard doing this trying to by yourself. So he brings her food. He says, but you have to remember to take care of yourself as well." And I thought it was like such a real good moment. And to me, like it's kind of like an eye opener. I really like this relationship between Lena and James. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm real into it.
Yeah. It's a really good relationship. Um, at first it was kind of like, well, this is going to be odd.
Yeah.
The sister of Lex Luthor and the best friend of Superman dating. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's
It's a
that's
weird,
just
it's a weird thing.
yeah, it's a weird pairing, but they've made it work so far. What's going to be interesting is how this all holds up, if it holds up,
And the
when the
whole
day comes.
with Supergirl.
When Yeah, because eventually Lena's going to find out Kara is Supergirl.
Mm-hmm.
Like eventually that's going to come out, and when it does, her reaction could jeopardize her relationship
Yeah.
with James. And
So I don't. And then this week, this episode ends, we see Mon-El and Supergirl flying around, being a group of superheroes again, and they notice a bunch of just birds just start dying and fall. And we zoom in on Mon-El and Supergirl again, and he says pestilence, and that's how the episode ends. Early numbers for this week: 0.4 rating, which is down 0.1, 1.38 million viewers, which is down 0.53, and that is a huge drop in lowest overnight numbers ever. Ugh. I don't even have a reason of why. I don't think anything happened.
No, I don't think so. I think it's just it's nicer weather. We're starting to get to that point in the year where the cold is going away. Like we said a few weeks ago, when the time change happens, it stays light longer outside.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be interesting to see what the DVR numbers are.
Yeah.
For an episode like this.
Next episode is titled "Of Two Minds." I can see that being a very Sam and Rain oriented episode.
I think it'll also have something to do with Imra.
Oh. Because we see her in the. I don't know if you saw the preview for next week. She's in it.
Oh, is she?
Yeah. So, Next show we have on the lineup is Flash, episode 419, titled "A Fury Road." Now, this episode was quite different. We, of course, this is coming off of, I guess, the Dibny death last week, and Harry's, big thing with the dark matter. And we got some answer with that. We see that Harry's stunt last episode is he's making him lose all his intelligence, and Gideon tells him that he would have to relearn everything he has ever learned again, which is rough. Could you imagine? And he has a big problem with this, and we get into it with Cisco later. But he has a big problem because you're one of the smartest people on the team, and you're losing your smarts. I couldn't imagine.
Well, and that's kind of what he alludes to, is his intelligence is his contribution to the team.
Yeah.
When he loses that, he has nothing to contribute. He's, in his eyes, he'll be nothing.
And he might as well just go back to, what was it, Earth 2?
Yeah.
We see Barry and Iris going back to therapy, and which I think the whole therapy scenes are kind of weird. I don't really understand them, because that's been a thing this whole season, is this therapy lady. And
they started going to her, right? Because they had to go through marriage counseling to get married.
And then it was post-marriage, and now we're post-Dibny death.
Yeah, I guess they just decided to keep it around as a little bit of a, what do you call it? Just giving the characters a way to talk about something that
not just between themselves.
Would have right.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it does a lot to the team. Well, for those two at least, Iris and Barry, and this one was very heavy on Dibny, and the way Barry is reacting to it, and it's almost and we find this out later in the episode, that he's not thinking about it, he's not dealing with it, he's not having a chance to grieve, and so that makes me think okay, Dibny's really gone. Then is how we're doing this, but. We find out that the whole team is dealing with Ralph's death differently, and also Killer Frost's technically death or disappearance, rather. Everyone's just
more of a.
Go ahead.
More of a disappearance, really. With her.
Well, not so much a death for her,
especially with what we find out toward the end of the episode.
Yeah, and of course we have this in Legends of Tomorrow, with the way, which I think coming up was a nice callback, with the way Victor Garber's character, Professor Stein, leaves the show on Legends. There was a central character that helped the team work through it. And just like that, we also get Leonard Snart comes back into the episode, and of course he helps the team deal with it as well. I love Wentworth Miller, period. And the fact that he came back this episode and he's also like helping them work through all this death and carnage, I just thought it was completely awesome. I loved the Flash writers for that. So we see the return of Leonard Snart, and we even go back to Earth X, where Snart is taking on another Black Siren. And I've got on the show notes here, enter eye roll, because I'm so sick and tired of seeing Katie Cassidy on all the shows. Oh, I feel like the character is overdone. I get it.
Well, it's not so much. I don't necessarily feel like the character's done. I just think you have all these other characters you could pick from. You just ended the season of Legends of Tomorrow, for instance. You could have pulled someone else over, an old villain of theirs, someone that we know wasn't dead. Something else could have been done.
Right.
It's not so much. They seem to be going back to the well for all these appearances to a select few group of people.
Right.
And it's just pick some different people occasionally, and let's get a little more exposure for some of these other characters before people forget about them.
Yeah.
No one's forgetting about Black Siren.
No, obviously with her being in just about every single show now. We see that Snart agrees to help the team out, but only if he's back on Earth X within 24 hours, because we find out that Snart and Ray are going to get married, which is fantastic, which is awesome. He also throws the quote in. He says, "If you crazy people," and he points to Iris and Barry, he says, "You'll live a happy life and get married." He goes, "We can too." And so they're actually getting married, which was awesome. And meanwhile, we flash over and see DeVoe and Lady DeVoe. We get a couple moments from them. And we're seeing like these weird moments from DeVoe where he's getting like genuinely angry at his wife, because she said, I think that, and whatever she heard, the rest of the line was, he like it was like a instant snap, and he turns on her and says, "That's why I do the thinking." And I was like, dude, that's your wife.
Wasn't this the scene where she walks in a favorite dress of his or something?
Yeah, like that was a bunch of her being romantic.
He blames her for, attempting to distract him.
Yeah,
from what he needs to.
That's rough.
Yeah.
And so the whole story of this, and the reason I don't have like a bunch of the notes and don't want to really talk about that much, is the biggest storyline is we're trying to transport Fallout to a different area. Because we're trying to get him away from DeVoe, and that was the whole reason of bringing Snart in, so we could keep Fallout's temperature to a certain elevation and radiation to a certain a certain range. And since we don't have Killer Frost anymore, it's kind of hard to do that. So we bring in him. And again, I love seeing him, but it didn't really do much for the story. We found out that the reason Fallout was being transported is still all according to the Thinker's plan, or to DeVoe's plans, which we don't know anything about yet. But like I just felt like it was a tie-in to kind of like a filler. I don't know if if this felt like that to you, but it was just like a big filler story that didn't have to do with anything.
Well, yeah, a little bit. I mean, I understand that you certainly don't want DeVoe to get your hands on this guy.
Yeah.
Or to get his hands on this guy. But it's just, yeah, it seemed like the point of the episode was like the A story was them trying to get Barry to grieve,
mm-hmm.
and that the transport of Fallout was just sort of, we need something action oriented to kind of keep the DeVoe story
progressing, I guess.
Yeah, and so they just kind of worked it in there. Maybe not. Maybe they saw that as the A story, but
yeah,
it certainly didn't really play out that way.
Well, like we see DeVoe trying to kidnap Fallout while they're transporting him, and the Flash has a brief moment of he uses the sonic scepter, and we found out that it doesn't work anymore due to Dibny's powers. And then that mention of Dibny's name, Flash kind of like had a momentary pause, and like shock, or I don't know, like flashback and kind of regret of everything that happened last episode. And we see that Black Siren from Earth X just randomly show up, and she kidnaps Fallout because it's a nuclear bomb essentially. And she, Flash, and Snart, well, Flash, Snart, and DeVoe all get taken down by Black Siren at the same time. Which we find out that DeVoe had all this plan, had even Black Siren from Earth X showing up according to plan, which I don't get that. I don't understand how you could plan that. There's no way that you would know that Black Siren's going to come through with. Anyways, then we also see, but what DeVoe didn't plan for was Flash's momentary pause.
Yeah.
That was.
Do you
Go ahead.
do you think though that what DeVoe planned, because he mentions that, or he didn't mention it. Snart mentioned that Black Siren was after him because they brought down Earth X's Green
Regime,
Arrow.
pretty much.
Yeah, and she was in love with him, and so that's why she was after Snart. And do you think that DeVoe knew that, and that's why he calculated that the team would have to go after Snart because Killer Frost is dormant, and all that would lead to that moment?
I just don't see. My biggest thing is I don't understand how you could understand what's going on a different Earth. Because as far as we know, DeVoe and his wife can't access the multiverse. So I just don't understand how he could, unless like he just calculated all these risks from what he knows about our Earth heroes, and what he saw in the Earth X nonsense. So I really don't know. It's just kind of.
It was telling, though. I think we got a glimpse of how they're going to bring him down because, as you mentioned, he couldn't calculate for the Flash's emotion.
Which I don't. You'd think he'd be able to. I don't know.
He's so cerebral that he doesn't
factor emotions
really,
in.
Yeah, they don't mean anything to him.
Yeah.
So, and he's gotten worse as he's become the thinker. Obviously, when we first meet him and we see these flashbacks with his wife, he was full of emotion.
Yeah.
But as he's developed, he's lost that, so he can't factor in emotion. I think that's how they're going to end up. The Flash team can become unpredictable because
they act on emotion instead of logic.
Right. He can't factor in for that.
We, like we said earlier, we see that Harry actually tells and shows Cisco what's really going on with him in the time chamber. And like you said earlier, that's what his motivation was. He thought he was the smartest person. That was his only obligation to the team, was his smarts. And Cisco got really like hurt and offended. He goes, "No, that's not it at all." And we saw a nice little moment there. So that was pretty much the only thing between Harry and Cisco the whole episode. And then we see that Leo actually talks Flash, which Leonard Snart's nickname from Earth X is Leo. We see him talking to Flash and to Barry into accepting Dibny's death, and we see, again, Grant Gustin's just phenomenal acting ability and him breaking down about everything. And then, like you said earlier, we learned DeVoe's weakness potentially is this emotion storylines we got going on. Early numbers for this one, 0.6 rating, which is down 0.1, 1.90 million viewers, which is up 0.02. And the next week's episode is Therefore She Is. Now, you have a note here. Did you see the preview for it?
I did not see the preview, but I saw a synopsis online, and it seems that Gypsy is going to be a part of next week's episode. I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting episode.
Yeah. I like Gypsy. I'm glad she's coming back, if that's the case. Because I'm really surprised we had her
Yeah.
dad in the episode and not her. But
Right.
we'll see. Next show and last show for Arrowverse we have is Arrow episode 620, titled Shifting Allegiances. We see Oliver is making which we did get what the title holds as well. But we do see Oliver in Moscow, and he makes a deal, I'm assuming, with a Bratva. We didn't really. I think we might have gotten an answer for that, but I'm not 100% sure. He took down a drug dealer and like a drug enterprise over in Moscow or in Russia, and he gets a knife from this leader. We see that Renee is finally back, and at first I was extremely excited because we haven't seen this character in a couple months. Well, about a month of show. Then we see Diggle working for Argus, and he is leading a team on his own, but he's still under people. And he did a real good job at it. Have you noticed that? Like the way he was, and that man, they mentioned it with his superior officer. I just thought it was a really nice callback to how he wanted his own team and he wanted to be the Arrow. But
Right.
you never know. And then we have this thing, we talked about it a little bit last week, of this quadrant organization that's just been kind of there, but we've, 6 seasons in, and it has not been mentioned once. Anyways, we see that Argus even knows about the quadrant, but why were we only introduced to them last episode? I don't know. It's a big plot hole to me.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to rack my brain and think and uh, try to remember if there's possibly an episode in the past where they mentioned it. I can't think of one.
No, I just like we've got all these different organizations, but if the quadrant is supposed to be the biggest one in America, why hasn't it ever been brought up?
Right.
Well, we see that Oliver was in Moscow helping the Bratva, and just to try and bring Anatoly back home and back into the Bratva. I think it was last season we first, delved into it. We saw that Anatoly was kicked out of the Bratva due to Arrow's doings and everything. And Arrow did all this favor so Anatoly could go back home. But what does Anatoly does? He tases Oliver and chains him up and hands him over to Diaz. But before we get to the rest of that storyline, we see that Quentin goes out to eat with Laurel, or Black Siren, and Quentin finds out that Diaz is with Black Siren. And Diaz tells Quentin it's his city, that he gives him a piece of paper because he wanted a building legally, and that if he didn't sign it, he was going to kill him and take down his city more. And then Quentin has a big problem with Laurel and Diaz being together, which again plays out into later on in the episode. We see that Dinah knew about the quadrant, and again, why? I just don't understand, Chris. I mean, it's like you've got on here. It is poor writing. I don't understand how we're building up this giant criminal organization, and it was only introduced in the last episode.
Yeah, if you're gonna in a show like this, 6 seasons in, if this were the first season and they were doing this, it'd make sense, right?
Yeah, I'd be
But
perfectly okay with it. It's like the whole Black Lightning and ASA thing.
yeah, 6 seasons in, and if we're just hearing about this organization, then at least all but one of the other characters should just be learning about it as well. I
Yeah,
don't understand why. Like, if there were one person that knew about it and they kept it a secret because of whatever reason, okay. But all these characters knew about it, and yet it's never been mentioned.
yeah. That just doesn't make sense to me. And if we can continue on this poor writing train here, we go back to Renee
Oh God.
yeah, here we go. We go back to Renee. Diggle's here. We see Renee, Curtis, and Dinah and Diggle all in their little new cave or whatever. And Diggle essentially saved this team in one of the little action scenes. And Renee is sitting down with his feet propped up on the table and goes, "I bet you want to thank you, huh, Haas?" And I'm like, "Are you serious right now? We're still doing this?" And I am.
First off,
Oh, come on.
they need to cut back the number of times they put Hoss in the script because it
Yeah,
gets old
it is
quick.
ridiculous.
Um,
Oh
but yeah,
man.
I don't know if he has little man syndrome or what, but he's got a chip on his shoulder,
Dude, I
and
don't
somebody needs
understand
to
this
knock it
writing.
off.
I don't get it.
It's just,
Like, I mean, and I know you're with me here,
it's
and I even texted you. Like, I feel like this show, like in the past 3 or 4 episodes since we have not had Renee in it, is 10
uh-huh.
times better when this whole
Yeah.
team is not even in it. On top of that,
Well, like I don't feel like Curtis and Dinah have worn out their welcome.
no, they're not that bad.
Renee has. Like I don't,
Mm,
and look, I know it's mainly to do with the storylines, but they've just worn this character's welcome out. I don't know how you bring him back to the point where people that are fans of the show like us are going to say, "Yeah, hey, we're perfectly cool with this character being back in for every episode next season."
mm,
You
I
probably
hope
got to
not.
get rid of this guy.
Yeah,
And it's that's sad, but I mean they don't have to kill him off,
yeah.
but
Just
they certainly.
get rid of them.
But I could see something where maybe he ends up sacrificing himself for to put Diaz down or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how they do it.
I'm gonna tell you right now, though. I know what happens. I bet we see William, which is Arrow's son, and Renee's daughter start forming a bond and a relationship. I bet we find out they go to the same school or
Oh
something,
Lord.
and that's how they're gonna bring them back into the fold.
Well, no, they could do it where if Renee gets killed somehow, that if William and his daughter know one another, maybe she goes to live with Oliver.
Even that, or like with her storyline, I feel like her and Curtis have been such like a good duo together. Like he's
Yeah,
pulling out all these dad jokes and taking
yeah,
care of her and everything.
definitely.
So I
But
don't know.
real quick, that team, the new team Arrow,
Hmm.
they this episode showed that they really need someone to lead them
Yeah,
because you can't have a team like that and have it be completely equal across the board. Somebody needs to step up and be a leader, and there's not a leader among that group.
no, and I feel like that was
That's why,
the whole point of Diggle in it.
yeah, they need a Diggle or they need an Oliver. They
Hmm.
need somebody that can step up and lead because none of them can do it.
No. Uh, Getting out of the Renee and poor writing standpoint, we we see Laurel come to the mayor's office where Quentin, of course, is mayor now, and she tells him, she goes, well, not really. Quentin finds out that Laurel is absolutely terrified and scared of Diaz. Obviously, last episode we saw him just burn and she mentions this to Quentin, man alive, and tortured him just because of a petty, school drama that went on. And
Hmm.
then we Quentin, of course, still doesn't care. He says, you did all this and probably behind my back on a lot of things. Spoiler alert, she did. Quentin kicks her out for her involvement with Diaz, and we find out that she is just trying to do. We find out that she's doing the good and trying to keep him safe. But just kidding, to have a good heart to heart, father daughter moment, well, father different Earth daughter moment, whatever. He keeps her in and signs the paper because he's doing this for her. And he had a nice little callback to Damien Dark last season and everything that went on and how he was working with him so he could keep people safe. And it's essentially the same thing now. We found out that Anatoly took Oliver to Diaz, and then Diaz and Oliver have like a little wrestling knockout drag out with the wager of whoever loses it has to leave Star City for good, which I thought was kind of cheesy and kind of predictable, but at least like the wager was, which is very, I guess, superhero-esque show anyways. If I win, you have to leave for good. Obviously, that's not the case. We see that Oliver wins, but Diaz plays dirty and dishonorable, which is a big thing, big plot sequence here, and pulls out a knife and stabs him in the gut. Oliver, as he's laying on the ground all bloody, and I feel like this was the strongest part of the episode, again, because it didn't have to do with the other teams. Oliver states, "You have failed this city, and I'm going to take it back from you." Then we see that Anatoly go to Oliver while he's in this cell, and we find out that it was potentially all a big con for Oliver and Anatoly, because Anatoly wanted to see if who was the most honorable between Diaz and Oliver. Obviously, it's Ollie. I mean, come on. But then Oliver gets walked into Diaz's office, and he says, "I see you're not planning to leave the city, so we'll just have to make you leave earlier rather than later." And he says, "Well, we're moving your trial up." And then here comes Star City Police and arrest him. And so he gets arrested, and the trial is supposed to be next week in Arrow time. I'm assuming we'll get that next week on the show, but I guess we'll find out. I thought this was an interesting point, because this was episode 20. And so I think we have 3 episodes left, if I'm not mistaken. I'll double check real fast. But that makes sense because we got 3 episodes left now. So I'm curious to see how this goes with them. And then early numbers, 0.3 rating, which is steady. 0.89 million viewers. We're not even at 1 million viewers, which is down 0.09, which ties Brother in the episode Brothers in Arms for the lowest overnight numbers ever for the show.
Yeah.
You.
Brothers in Arms, I believe
that was last
the
season.
One with Oliver and Diggle's fight. No, that was this season.
You're right.
I think that was the fight, but yeah,
that's dude. Not good.
Should we tease the casting news that came out about this next episode?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead.
I'll let you do that.
Oh, so we have a little, and Stephen Amell, I'm blaming you for this little bit of news, because you tweeted out a video of his chair that he sits in for the show. It has Stephen Amell, and then you see a character in the Green Arrow outfit go and sit down in it, and it zooms in on the face, and it's Colin McDonald. So Tommy Merlin is wearing the Arrow suit and sitting in Stephen Amell's chair. So he's going to be in next week's episode. How and or why? I know you said, I think we said in the pre-show that you're thinking he's potentially from like a different Earth.
That's been mentioned.
Yeah. Or Thea and Roy bring him back using the Lazarus Pit that they find and try and take down. And I had a theory and they send him to Star City. Or I had the theory of Malcolm Merlin already brought him back multiple seasons ago, and he's just been ignoring Star City. And then, Thea and Roy find him and send him back or something. All would work just fine. Well, except for the different Earth one. That's kind of an eye roll.
Yeah.
But of course that episode is titled Docket Number 11, 1941-73. Okay. I could see that being about his trial, if anything.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, it is time for the fan favorite segment of Douche Canoe of the Week. Who holds that beautiful honor?
This week it was pretty easy. It was DeVoe.
Yeah.
I mean, just the way he was treating his wife, if nothing else.
That was just wrong.
Yeah.
And of course, with the previous episodes, we've seen him drugging her. And it was hinted at last episode as well. But, dude, come on. That's just, like, he's gotten the honor a lot lately. Or the dishonor, rather. Like, the last time he had it was episode 28 of Hero Cravings, so 2 weeks ago. But, I guess it just really shows that character and his character involvement. Now
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, Chris, it is time for my favorite segment, particularly Hero of the Week. Who holds this glorious honor?
Well, Tyler, I'm gonna let you say it because you love this character.
So
I really like the character, but you
yeah,
love this character. So
so well, this week it is Leonard Snart from Earth X, or Leo, whatever you want to call him. I feel like I love Wentworth Miller. Period. Phenomenal actor, phenomenal person in general. But and on the shows that he's been presented, is like he's had like a total 180 flip from Leonard Snart of Earth One and Leonard Snart of Earth X. But with this episode, like he acts like a therapist. He's always that bridge for the Arrowverse of, someone just died tragically on your world, but he also has had all that happen on Earth X. Of all the people he knows and loves has been killed off. So like he's able to help out, and with him helping, he talked to Caitlin about her Killer Frost problem, and helped Barry through everything, and like the funny jokes that he's had in between with everything. I love him. He deserves this honor this week. Now, Chris,
absolutely.
actually, I'm going to pull up the question from last week on my phone here. So last week we introduced the weekly questions that you could obviously answer on Twitter and Facebook on our Nerdwide pages. And last week's question for the Arrowverse was, do you think Barry will save Dibney, or is he lost for good? And 100% of you said there is still hope for Dibney, which is insane for me. So that's where I aligned anyways. And then the question for this week is it possible for Green Arrow to turn everything around that's going on? So we'll have the answers on our Twitter and Facebook poll, so make sure you vote there and give us your input. But Chris, do you have anything else for this week?
Well, we need to name our favorite episodes.
Oh, how did I completely just skip over all that?
You were so happy to talk about Leonard Snart, you just skipped right over the episode.
Chris, what was your favorite episode this week?
Man, I really loved Supergirl this week.
Yeah, that was mine too, actually.
Yeah, it was a fun episode. You got to see, the training with the cape, Kara learning something new that her outfit can do.
What's funny is like,
and
I don't even think Clark, like Superman, knows these tricks.
I don't know, because it seems like there are some scenes in comics and things where he'll use his cape as a.
Maybe then.
Maybe.
Just didn't want to share it with her.
They just don't talk a lot, apparently.
Right.
But I like the fact that we're moving along with the World Killer storyline, and we know that Sam wants to be saved from it now that she's aware.
Yeah.
Like you said during our talk of the episode, the fact that we're getting to see Jean and his father and that dynamic
was the biggest thing with me, was like their dynamic, and like just to see his father like cringe and like reach out and attack Jean. He's like, you're just trying to put me in another cell. You're trying to contain me. He goes, I've been in a cell for 200 years. You're not going to do it to me again. He goes, it's my own son. Like, it was just very emotional. And I feel like a lot of the emotional shows get me more so than anything. But I'm a sucker for it.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, you got anything else for this week? Since did I skip over anything else?
No. Arrowverse, I think all the shows are going to be back next week, of course. So we'll be talking about them all then. And
getting real close to our finales.
Yeah, well, except for Supergirl. That's the only one that's the finale is still a good ways out on.
Yeah.
But
guys, biggest thing is for me is make sure or actually go to our Nerdwide and Facebook pages and vote for them. Vote for your answers. Guys, that's it for this week. Make sure you review us on whatever podcasting service you use. Don't forget to share it around on all your favorite social media platforms as well. Like I said, you can follow us on Twitter at nerd_wide. That's where we're going to be doing all of our polling. And then you can follow me personally at Ty_Haynes. And you can follow Mr. Rivers at MavTN7. And if you do come and follow us on any of those Twitter handles, make sure you let us know which favorite show you came from and which is your favorite show, or if you have any suggestions to make our show Hero Cravings better. But as always, I'm your host Tyler Haynes with my good friend and the man himself, Chris Rivers, and we cannot wait to share our thoughts with you next week.
Bye, everyone.